Bible and turn to chapter 5 of Mark, page 833 in our church Bibles around you, 833, Mark chapter 5. So some of you have been here for quite a while. We have been going through the Gospel of Mark now for 4 months. Can you believe it? 4 months, and we've gotten through 4 chapters. So I sometimes move really slow, and then sometimes I move faster. We're going to go through all of chapter 5 today. So I'm not going to read quite all of it, but I'm going to read a lot of it. And I'm going to start by reading the first story. If you're new to the church thing, this is a fun story. This is one of the more interesting stories in the whole New Testament. So you came on a good day if you like good stories. So let me begin reading Mark chapter 5, verse 1. So they arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from a cemetery to meet him. This man lived among the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, say restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as often as he snapped the chains from his wrists and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him, say subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. When Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him, ran to meet him, and bowed low before him. With a shriek he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, because there are so many of us inside this man." When the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to a distant place. Now there happened to be a herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the spirits begged. "Let us enter them." So Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. The herdsmen fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what had happened. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons. He was sitting there fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. Then don't you wonder what perfectly sane was like? It just occurred to me. I'd have liked to have seen that. I've never seen that. Okay, now I lost my place. Sorry about that. Sometimes I have these little conversations in my head. They were afraid. And then those who had seen what happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. But Jesus said, "No, go home to your family and tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he has been." So the man started off to visit the 10 towns in the region, and he began to proclaim the great things Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed at what he told them. All right, fun story. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to be perfectly sane, or what it means to be normal in a sense. So I think it's interesting how certain things become normal in life and we don't really question them. And I found this list about our own culture here in the United States, and about how sometimes we don't think of things in the way that maybe you will now when I share them with you. So, for example, only in America can a pizza get to your house faster than an ambulance. Make sense? Only in America are there handicapped parking places in front of a skating rink. Only in America do drugstores make the sick people walk all the way to the back of the store to get their prescriptions, while healthy people can buy cigarettes in the front. Only in America do people order double cheeseburgers, large fries, and a Diet Coke. Only in America do banks leave both doors open and then chain the pens to the counters. Only in America do we leave cars worth thousands of dollars in the driveway and put useless junk in our garage. That's probably kind of personal for some of you, I bet. Only in America do we use answering machines to screen calls and then have call waiting so we won't miss a call from someone we didn't want to talk to in the first place. Only in America I thought these were funnier than you do, by the way. Even the first service was laughing more than you are, and they usually are pretty dead, but I'm going to rethink how I talk about you now. Only in America do we buy hot dogs in packages of 10 and buns in packages of 8. That one really bugs me, actually. That's always bugged me. Only in America do we use the word I'm going to share this one. Only in America do we use the word politics to describe the process so well. Poly, in Latin meaning many, and ticks meaning blood-sucking creatures. And only in America do they have drive-up ATMs with Braille lettering. All right. So, want to tell you that we are going to have our question now. If you're new here, we ask a question every week. People are invited to answer it if they would like. We often have a question that invites some transparency, and it does today. So, has there been a time, or have you ever felt less than human, or like you're not normal? And if you'd be willing to share with us a brief answer, get these guys' attention. They'll bring a microphone around to you. You speak directly into the mic and give us a brief answer. So let's see if we can get a couple of you to share today.
Good morning. My name is Samantha. I am in recovery, and in addition to being in recovery, I deal with depression and anxiety, and I have for most of my life. And I remember, as far back as, probably 10 years old, kind of dealing with those things, even to my parents saying out loud that I just wish I was normal. And I guess I didn't really even understand what normal meant. I just knew I didn't feel normal. But I'm really grateful that now in my recovery, I guess I'm glad I'm not normal in a strange way. When I was battling my alcoholism and I was still actively drinking, I just repeatedly had that thought of, I just wish I was normal. I wish I didn't have to deal with this. I wish I wasn't an alcoholic. But now in recovery, I am glad that I'm a recovering alcoholic.
Thanks, Samantha. That was excellent. Who else would like to share?
Hello, everyone. I'm Dempsey. I shared a little bit earlier this morning, but 6 years ago, when I found myself in a halo from a broken neck, and I was walking, I realized that I suffered from a thing called survivor's guilt, and I didn't know much about neck problems and back issues until my second vertebrae decided not to work properly. And when I was fighting to have money coming in, I was told no quite frequently from places that I was going and filling out paperwork, and I felt as if I would never be out of the halo, especially when I was in that. And I talked to a good friend of mine who told me he can give me a job as a standing coat rack. So I had opportunity. And I just wanted to share one more thing about normalcy. The only normal I've ever heard is a setting on a washing machine. So with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Dempsey. Anybody else willing to share today? Would love to do a couple more.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Holly. I am in recovery, my second attempt. This time around, my eyes are a lot more open, and there is no thing called normal, like what Dempsey said, on a washer, maybe. That's normal. Just like last night, I was opening to my fiance about little chapters of my life that are starting to make sense. You know, like this happened, that led to this, that led to this. If I would have did this, you know, the woulda, shoulda, coulda, but it didn't go that way. So just speaking with him and like my mother especially, they say, oh, well, you know, I feel that all the time too. And it's like, no, you don't understand. This is not me, okay? There's something up here that's not me. This is not even close to being aligned. And all I get told is, oh, just give it time, give it time. So at times, yes, last night especially, I was bawling in tears and feeling like I was crazy and that everyone else around me is looking at me like I'm the crazy one. And then I had a dream last night where everyone was out to get me, saying that I'm relapsing and that I'm using things that I haven't used in years, trying to like pin me down and make me the bad one. So then that again makes me feel like I am so not normal. What is normal? I'm a wackadoo, and everyone else is just dealing and coping so easily. So it makes me feel like I'm the only one, but obviously I'm not the only one that feels this way. And that's why coming back here, this is my first service in months, and I love it here. I'm not normal. None of us are. Like the band say, no normal people allowed. Thank you.
Thanks, Holly. Welcome back, and I suspect others know what you're feeling. Anybody else be willing to do one more if anybody else wants to share? All right. Thank you guys for helping out, and thank you for those of you who are willing to share, so appreciate it. A pastor's job is multifaceted. I do a lot of different things, and I like that about my life. I get to know people really, really well sometimes, and truth is as I look out at you, some of you I know a lot about you, and some of you, or most of you actually, I know a little bit about, and I like that about my life. Sometimes as a pastor, I get to tell people good news, and oftentimes that's what I do, and I love that part of my life, to tell people good news. I mean, in many ways, you know, really what I do is I tell people the good news about God's love for them in Jesus Christ. But sometimes I have to tell people bad news. And I don't like that part so much. And it can be hard in many ways, like right now, because I've got something that I need to tell you. And I want to confess before I share it that some of you may not take it well. You are not normal. No, you're not really understanding me. So there is very little that is normal about you. Like you're here and normal is over here. Do you have or like you're on the ridge of the Grand Canyon? Normal is on the other side. That's what I mean. Or maybe more, well, you're standing in California on the beach looking out at the ocean, and Japan, you can't see it, but Japan is over there. Japan is normal, and you're on the beach in California. Do you get what I mean? Turn and tell your neighbor, I don't think he thinks you're normal. Turn back and say right back at you. I have a favorite author. Many of you have read books of his. He has a book that some of you have probably read that I think has the best book title ever. The title is Everybody's Normal Until You Get to Know Them. And in many ways, the book could have been titled Everybody Thinks They're Normal, but They're Not. Because that's really what the book is about. That's not quite as catchy of a title. But the basic premise of the book is this, that everybody is a little bit weird. Everybody around you, turn and look to your right, turn and look to your left. Everybody around you is a little bit weird. There's something a little bit off about every person in this room. And the truth of the matter is, and Holly, I think you're the one who alluded to it, I don't know if there really is this normal standard. I'm not sure if there's anything that really we could say, well, that's a normal human being. What does that look like? And in many ways, I think that we go through a lot of our life somehow expecting that we're going to become normal or feel normal, and there really isn't such a thing. Now, there might be stable, or there might be, somewhat sane, or maybe, I don't know about perfectly sane like we read about, but normal, is there really anything that would be considered a normal human being? I read a quote in my preparations this week. The author said, if you don't belong in a mental institution, you must be a very boring person. This morning, what I want to do is I want to take a little different approach to the story that I read just a few moments ago in chapter 5. And actually of Mark as a whole, because we're going to read a little bit more of Mark 5. And I've already talked about, in this series that I've been doing for a few months, I've already talked about demon possession, so you can go back at an old message and hear that. And I've already talked about Jesus and healing, which we're going to read about also this morning. But this morning what I want to do is I want to look at something in this story that we read that you may not notice. So I want to take a little bit of a different approach. A reading of Mark chapter 5 specifically can help us maybe look at these characters that Jesus comes across and watch their interaction with Jesus and maybe learn something about our own lives and about how we view other people, how we treat other people who are just as abnormal as you, by the way. All right? So here's what I want to share with you. I'm going to tell you up front that I have 2 points. And then I'm going to talk about the 2 points. The first point is this. Today, when you leave, I want you to begin to see yourself as Jesus sees you. And the second point is I want you to work with me to start seeing other people like Jesus sees other people. One of the risks of reading the story of the man possessed by demons is we read it and we right away compare ourselves to him. And some of the people in this room have had some interesting backgrounds, just to say the least, by the way. And so we can read this story about the man possessed by demons and we think, man, maybe I'm okay. Not that bad. And, that guy was crazy. Maybe I'm sane after all. Or maybe I'm not so bad off as I thought. Because that guy was off the charts. And one of the things that I wanted to do from the beginning today was establish this idea that maybe you are a little bit crazy. And that we are not normal either. And one of the things that I think that I have learned in my own recovery journey has been to look at people and some of what they're going through and not compare myself with them and not think, man, they're better than me or they're worse than me, but just think to myself, but by the grace of God go I. Right? I could be me, but it's not. And there might be all sorts of reasons why that ain't me. I mean, it might be some difference in our upbringings or some bad breaks that I've had or they've had. Maybe I've been able to somehow muster together a few more good decisions than another person. Or there's just cultural difference. And yet, the truth of the matter is that we compare ourselves with others all of the time. Am I correct? We spend a lot of time comparing ourselves with others. Whether you are in a program to deal with mental health or illness or addiction, whether or not you have a loved one struggling or you've been in legal issues, we look at each other and we can kind of evaluate how we're doing and sometimes begin to think, well, maybe I don't have a problem at all. because I'm certainly not as bad as that person over there. And I think it's a good start for us to just realize that none of us in this room is really that normal. And so, if there's one takeaway from what I just shared, it might be that instead of comparing ourselves with others, maybe we just kind of keep reminding ourselves, well, it could be worse. Could be worse, right? Could always be worse. But for the grace of God go I. And I think it's a good line for us to remember. So I read this story of the man possessed by all these demons, and I try to put myself often in the place of the characters in the Bible. And so when I was reading this story this week, I was trying to say, what does this say about myself? What might I learn from this guy that Jesus, comes in contact with about myself? And it causes me to think deeply about how I view myself and how I view other people. So that's what I want to help you do. I want to help you see yourself this morning as Jesus sees you, and I want you to begin to see other people like Jesus sees them. So grab your Bible. And we're not going to go back through that whole story. It's page 833 in our church Bibles. But for now, I just want to read one more verse and focus on that one verse. It's Mark chapter 5, verse 3. Did you find verse 3? There it says, "This man lived among the burial caves, and he could no longer be" what? Restrained even with a chain. Now, that's an interesting word. I mean, we right away picture being restrained with a chain. But I want to share with you what the word there actually means in its original form. The word, it's going to be on the screen before you, is actually damazo in Greek. And the word actually means, it's a word that's used to describe the taming of wild animals. It's a word used to describe the taming of a wild animal. And what I want you to see is this man, because of what he was dealing with, what he was going through, he was seen as a wild animal that needed to be tamed. Because of his behavior, this man was viewed by society and likely by him himself as something less than human. Not a human being, but a wild animal who needed to be tamed. And one of the things that we learn in this story, of course, is that Jesus has power over the demonic. But we also learned something even more important. It's going to be on the screen. That those things that enslave us and dehumanize human beings are also demonic. That's what I want you to learn. Those things that enslave and dehumanize human beings are demonic. We're all talking about these things that represent really the dark side of life. And they are part of what the Bible calls evil in this world, or things that are of Satan. So I was thinking about what those kind of things would be for our Lighthouse community. And, the list is pretty simple if you think about it. What are the things that enslave us or dehumanize us? If you've ever suffered abuse in your life, whether it be verbal or physical or sexual abuse, those things dehumanize you. And you're perhaps enslaved in a cycle of trying to figure out how to get out of the experience that you had maybe long, long ago. If you have suffered feelings of abandonment in your life, those things dehumanize us, and they devalue us, and they enslave us. Grief can do that to us when we experience a severe loss. If we don't move through grief in a healthy way. If you suffer from addiction, you know what that does to us and how it enslaves us. And if you have suffered from addiction, there have been times in your life when you felt less than human, right? Like a wild animal. Mental illness, depression, a lot of those things, they enslave us, they trap us, and they make us feel like we're not normal, like we're less than human. Even being, and some of you have maybe encountered this, being treated as inhuman, especially by people in authority, can make you feel that way. So I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying that if you have these things in your life that you are demon-possessed. I want to be clear about that, okay? You may deal with demons because of it, and, that's another conversation. I also don't want to say that the person who has maybe hurt you was possessed by demons. What I want you to see is that they are part of what the Bible calls evil. And they are part of this world in which we live because of the sin in this world and the brokenness of this world in which we live. The brokenness of our lives and the world around us is a result of the sinfulness in us and all around us. And I don't know, you'll have to tell me, things are not right here in this earth. Do I have to convince you of that? Things just, they're not quite right. That's what we're talking about. They're not according to how God had originally created this world to be. And it's really, it draws back to the sinfulness and the self-centeredness and the pride that we as human beings have. My guess is that you know that. You see it and you know it in your own life. That's why you're here. Things are not right here. They're not how God intended. And God alone, I want you to know, can ultimately make things right in your life. Too often here we let our sinfulness or our brokenness or the struggles that we have in our life define us, and that's what I want to talk about this morning. But this spring, or it's not spring yet, is it? This Lenten season, Lent often comes in spring. I've been teaching on Wednesday nights about the serenity prayer, and I just wanted to point out for those of you who have been with us on Wednesday nights that there's a line in the serenity prayer that really points to this fact that we live in such a world and that we just need to accept that. And it's going to be on the screen. It says this, that part of the serenity prayer. Why don't you read it with me? Taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will. For those of you who spend time around recovery meetings, you'll often hear people say that I'm working on taking life on life's terms. That's what it means. This world is kind of a mess, and I'm just trying to accept that this world is a mess. That it's a broken world, it's a sinful world, but God will make things all right if I surrender to his will. What I want you to notice is in this story is that when Jesus sees the man, there's nothing that indicates that Jesus sees a wild animal. That's what I want you to notice. When Jesus sees this man, he does not see a wild animal that needs to be tamed, but a human being who is worth helping. He doesn't see the man's behavior or his struggles. He sees a man of worth and of value, and sees what God had created in him in the beginning. In other words, no matter what you're going through, what I want you to hear today is that when you stand before Jesus, he does not see the struggles that you've had or the pain that you're going through today. He sees what God has put into you. He sees a person of value and worth. He sees something beautiful, even when we don't feel beautiful on the outside. So Jesus cast demons out of this man. I have to comment on that because he cast them into this herd of pigs. And who felt sorry for the pigs when I read the story? Yeah, I knew there would be some. So you can kind of divide people into two categories. One is the people who felt sorry for the pigs, and the others who thought, man, that's a lot of lost bacon. That's a lot of lost bacon. And, you can admit it because, some of you, you love animals. I like animals, but some of you, it's a little bit weird. I ask about you and, well, here's who I am and I have kids. You have kids. I've got pictures. And then they show me a picture of their cat or their dog. So I'm just kidding. Actually, God loves animals. God created animals. So this isn't a story about animal abuse or anything like that. Actually, pigs were a despised animal back in Jesus' day. And one of the things that I suspect is going on here, if you've ever gone through kind of a traumatic change or healing, you might have wondered, is it real or is it true? I sometimes wonder if Jesus cast the demons out of the man into the pigs so that he would see it's gone. See it's gone, kind of an interesting thought. But God loves animals, but here's the deal. He loves you more. You are of more value than animals. Matthew 10, 29 through 31, it's going to be on the screen. Jesus said, "Not a single sparrow can fall to the ground without your Father knowing it, and the very hairs on your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are more valuable to God than a whole flock of sparrows." And then in Psalm chapter 8, verses 4 and 5, it says, "What are mere mortals that you should think about them? Human beings that you should care for them? You have made them only a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor." You know what that says? You are not a wild animal. Did you hear that? You are not a wild animal. I'm going to come back to that, but I want you to hear that and realize you have been created a little bit lower than God himself. In the beginning it says that we have been created in God's image. That God has put into us something that also belongs to him. So, in the next story, in chapter 5, we meet another person who is also dehumanized. And I want to point that out because some of you are going to be able to relate to this woman as well. So I'm just going to read a part of the rest of the chapter, if you can turn there with me. Chapter 5, verse 21. So it says, "Jesus got into the boat again, and he went back to the other side of the lake where a large crowd gathered around him on the shore. When a leader of a local synagogue, in other words, a religious leader whose name was Jairus, arrived. When he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet, pleading fervently with him. 'My little daughter is dying,' he said. 'Please come and lay your hands on her, heal her so she can live.' Jesus went with him, and all the people followed, crowding around him. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years she had spent everything she had to pay them. But she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. She had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe. For she thought to herself, 'If I can just touch his robe, I will be healed.' Immediately the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed of her terrible condition. Jesus realized at once that healing power had gone out from him. So he turned around in the crowd and asked, 'Who touched my robe?' His disciples said to him, 'Look at this crowd pressing around you. How can you ask, who touches me?' But he kept on looking around to see who had done it. Then the frightened woman, trembling at the realization of what had happened to her, came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. And he said to her, 'Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over.'" We're not going to read the rest. Then they learn that this Jairus' daughter had died, and Jesus goes and he raises her from the dead. So you can read that rest on. It's a great chapter. But I want to point out something about this woman that you may not know. It said that she was in a flow of blood. You remember that? For how long? 12 years. That's a long time. What you may not know is that a woman who was in a flow of blood was believed to be rendered unclean at that time. So she had a status. They might not have said you're a wild animal, but you're an unclean person. You know what you do with unclean people back in Jesus' day? You stay away from them. You can't touch them, because if you touch them, then you would be unclean. It's possible that this poor woman had not had the significance of human touch for 12 years. 12 years. I sometimes think maybe we shouldn't be shaking hands when, I got a little crud in my throat, we got all these bugs, and then I remind myself that people here come all the time who have kind of begun to tell themselves that they're untouchable or that they're unclean. And one of the things that I want you to know that in this place there are no untouchables and there are no unclean. She suffered socially and psychologically. Some of you know what that's like. She approaches Jesus from behind, hopefully unnoticed, hoping to touch his garment and disappear, as just her approach to Jesus would have been unlawful. I was thinking about how we reach out to fill the void in us all the time when we feel enslaved or when we feel dehumanized. We reach out to fill that void all the time. Feeling less than human, we can take that feeling away sometimes, we think, with a drink or with a drug, and so we reach out to them. Or maybe you've reached out to another lover's arms, or you've binged on food or spending, or we can add a long list, who knows what, images on a computer screen. The problem is that all of those things, they leave us emptier than we were before. That's the problem. They leave us emptier than we were before. And the thing that this woman teaches us, that if you're in that place where you're feeling unclean, untouchable, unredeemable, inhuman, what does she do? She reaches out to Jesus. That's where she reached. She reaches out to Jesus. And I want you to notice that she looks at both Jairus, Jesus looks both at Jairus and this woman the same. She doesn't, he doesn't tell the woman, I've got a religious leader here, he's more important than you. They're equal before Jesus. He doesn't look at Jairus or the woman any more significantly or important than the man who had been possessed by demons. Because Jesus doesn't see people like we see people. Jesus looks at people, and he has this amazing way of looking past the things on the outside. He has this amazing way of looking past the hurts and the struggles and the insecurities and seeing what God has put inside of us. And so what I want you to know today is that when Jesus looks at you, he sees you as a person of intrinsic value and worth. He does not see what you see. He does not see what the world has seen. He does not see what people are telling you about yourself. He does not see the lies that you're telling yourself. He sees a person of intrinsic value and worth, a person that he loves, a person who has been created in the very image of God, a masterpiece. So I ask you, how do you see yourself? How do you see yourself? I want you today to begin to see yourself as Jesus sees you. A person worth dying on the cross for. A person whose life is redeemable. You are a son or daughter of the King. Say, of the King. You are a son or daughter of the King. You are God's own child. Now, I'd be remiss not to say something because that has some implications. You know what that means? It means that you are not a wild and uncontrollable animal. So don't live like one. You're not a wild God has put in something inside you that does not have to live like a wild and uncontrollable animal. We don't live our lives to earn God's love or favor. We live our lives, once we get to know Jesus, to rise to the standards of what we've been since our creation and our birth. Did you hear that? So when we get to know Jesus, he somehow empowers us to begin to live our lives to the standards of what we've always been. Because the Holy Spirit now lives in us and God's grace redeems us. And we're gonna always struggle in this life, with things like sin and brokenness, but we're going to remember that from today on we're going to begin to see ourselves like Jesus sees us, and that I don't need to live like that anymore. Amen? Amen. So finally, I want to ask you, how do you look at other people? When we started Lighthouse, I wanted to create a community where we see people with the intrinsic value that they have been given. That every human being that walks through the doors of this place is somebody of great value and worth. And that this is a place where we see each other all the same. Where color doesn't matter, where background doesn't matter, where legal issues don't matter, where life struggles don't matter, where when you come into this place, we see what's inside. Now that's hard in this world. I mean, it can be really hard. We look around and we see green hair and red and black hair, and we see nice clothes, or we see tattered clothes. We see, tattoos sometimes with, very colorful messages, and piercings in places. And we don't see all those, but it's so easy to judge in this world. And we are, you may not know this because you don't go to church all that often anymore, or in the past, but we're a little bit of a weird place. But that's because we're trying to live that out. And so not only do I want you to begin to see yourself as Jesus sees you, this is a prayer that I have said every day for a long time now. I pray every morning, Jesus, or God, can you give me Jesus eyes? And I'm far from there. I'll never be there. But that's the kind of thing that we work on when we're growing in faith, when we've made Jesus our Savior. We're going to try to look at people like Jesus looked at them, and not see their issues and their stuff and all the pain that might be going on in their life, but see what God has planted in there. That he created this person just like everyone else to be of value and worth. If you've got some labels on you, I understand that. You may have put them on yourselves, or the world may have put you. Sometimes those things are important in society or for your recovery. But here, the only label that matters is that you are a child of God, and that you are a beautiful person created in the image of God. There's no unclean, no untouchable. What God has created in you, and that Jesus now lives in you, is something of a masterpiece. And I want you to go home, and I want you to remember that today and this week, okay?